Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Expat Chapter, brought to you by Blevins Franks Wealth Management. Across Europe, Blevins Franks are trusted advisors to over 5,000 British nationals and other nationalities who have UK connections. In these podcasts, we discuss the issues affecting those people that have now relocated to France or are thinking of relocating to France. The subjects we discuss are subjects and situations our clients have encountered, and we frankly answer the questions you maybe didn't even know you needed to ask. So, my name is Rob Kay. I'm joined on these podcasts by Tom Marron.
Good morning.
Morning, Tom. And James Griffiths. Good morning, James. Okay, last week we discussed potentially moving to Dubai and how France could be a tax haven, even compared to Dubai. But one of the things that everyone needs to do is when they leave the UK, they need to understand the UK statutory residence test. So what's the starting point, James? What's the pitfalls that people need to understand to begin with?
Yeah, I thought it'd be good to speak about this because I speak to numerous people that think they kind of move to France and all of a sudden they're French tax resident and they don't need to worry about UK tax anymore. But actually, that's not correct. Unless you've got kind of employment and you've moved to France for a job, well, that is correct. You get split tax year treatment. And the date you leave the UK, you stop being UK resident, and the day you arrive in France, you effectively become French tax resident. That's nice and simple. But we speak a lot about people to people that are not going to be working in France. They either don't work or they're retired, and that's a bit more complex. So there's a few key areas here. You've got to think about the year of exit from the UK and get that right, and then you kind of look through at future years. So the starting point is the statutory residence test. So this is from a UK point of view, trying to deem whether you are automatically overseas resident, which is the first part of the test, or automatically UK resident, which is the second part of the test. And depending on how they go, you kind of, when you get to one, you're either automatically resident or automatically not resident. You kind of stop there. But if it's not clear cut from either of those first two tests, you then get to a sufficient ties test. And then based on the amount of time you spent in the UK and various different ties to the UK, for example, if your family is still there, as in immediate family and dependent children, that kind of thing, partners, whether you've got a property available to you, whether you do any work, how long you've lived in the UK would impact the number of ties you've got. And the more ties you have, the less time you can spend in the UK without being deemed UK tax resident. So it's really important, especially to begin with, to get that right and to shed that UK tax residence. But I've seen time and time again, people think just because they've moved to France and have left the UK, they actually don't need to consider UK rules anymore. But that is invariably incorrect. And it's quite a key part of the planning that we put in place when we're helping people transition out of the UK and into France.
Since Brexit, everyone seems to talk about the 90-day rule. Well, is there actually a 90-day rule for UK residency, Tom?
Well, there is, but not necessarily in every case. And I think this is a misconception. It's one of the things that people sometimes get wrong. And actually, the number of days that you can spend in the UK depends on the number of ties that you have there. So as James mentioned earlier, you've got various different ties. For example, family, accommodation, work, previous UK presence, and also a country tie. So HMRC will look at the number of ties that you have in determining the number of days that you can spend in the UK and not be considered UK resident. For some people, that is indeed 90 days, but we had a case recently where it was 120 days for the couple in question. As James said before, it just needs some careful consideration and planning, because if you're moving to France and then you're starting to restructure assets, it can have dire consequences if you inadvertently are still classified as a UK resident.
Yeah, one of the things I find with most people is that they don't understand that because the UK tax year is different to the French tax year, if they leave, let's say they were leaving now, partway through a UK tax year, and actually let's say they crystallize again this year, even though they've arrived in France and become French tax residents, they've still got a UK liability. One of the things that is on everyone's mind at the moment is the forthcoming UK budget. And one of the things that's been mooted is that capital gains will change. And there's lots of people been contacting us who, if it goes the wrong way on the 28th of October, want to get out. James, is that feasible? Can they get out?
Yeah, with the right planning, they can do. Yeah, it depends on their situation really. But one of the key things is that if to get split year treatment, and what I mean by that is that you are a UK tax resident for the time you spent there, you move to France, and you are no longer deemed UK tax resident from the time you leave, and you're French tax resident. You have to spend less than 16 days in, or it's actually midnights, but 16 midnights. We call it days, but it's technically midnight in the UK. So if you move today, let's say, then you can't spend more than 16 days in the UK until the 6th of April next year. And what that does is it does give you a clear cut, a split tax year treatment, which means anything you do as soon as you arrive in France would be liable to French taxation as a French tax resident rather than the UK. So yeah, there is going to be this small window where people can get out, but they are going to have to kind of jump through a few hoops to make that work. For example, not spending much time at all in the UK.
So are there things, James, that you tell people when you're advising them what they should be doing to reduce those connections?
Yeah, I mean, one that is a difficult one because the property, UK property, it can be challenging because people, if they're moving to France, they like to keep that UK property to go back and see family and friends. Also as a safety net that if they don't like living in France, they can always go back and kind of nothing changes. But having that property available to you is deemed to be a tie to the UK. You can spend less time in the UK to not be a UK tax resident. So selling or at least renting that property out, and not to a child or something like that, but actually to a third party at full market value, would be one of the ways you can reduce that link back to the UK. So yeah, it's really a game of trying to get assets out of the UK where possible. We spoke on the last podcast about UK inheritance tax rules and getting away from them the minute you arrive in France with the double tax agreement. So there's elements of trying to shed that UK tax residency, but also shed assets in the UK, so you're not bound by UK rules once you're living in France.
I mean, is there a bit of danger here with regards to the year that you leave the UK and getting things wrong? Because that's obviously the time when we do the most planning for people at the point when they cross the border.
Yeah, I mean, it can be hugely dangerous for somebody if they have moved to France and started doing their restructuring, but they haven't properly shed their UK residency. A good example of that, one of the things that we often discuss with clients is this idea that you can encash your pension tax efficiently under the French rules. So you can potentially extract a pension from the UK and ultimately pay around about 7.5% tax to do that. But if somebody is still considered as UK resident, then they are on the hook for 45% UK income tax, which they may not be able to reclaim. So they could have a fight on their hands with HMRC. That's one example. And then I suppose an example would be selling UK property, as James kind of touched upon a moment ago. Now, the UK, once somebody leaves the UK gives you an exemption on capital gains tax for any gains that applied or were accumulated prior to April 2015. Now, if you haven't properly shed your UK residency, you're not going to get that exemption from HMRC. And that could make a huge difference in terms of the tax. So, as James mentioned before, when we're speaking with clients, this is one of the things we're really careful about. We want to make sure that they have shed their UK tax residency before they get into doing any of that kind of restructuring.
Yeah, for me, it's just so important for that holistic financial planning. So not just looking at setting up a different investment or moving money offshore, you've got to look at the bigger picture. This is a vital part of the kind of planning process of when we do these kind of strategic reports or roadmaps, as I kind of call them, of transitioning people out of the UK and into France. You've got to get everything right in the right order for it all to work. Otherwise, there's huge pitfalls that you can find. For example, if you go to the bank and they suggest you do this, that, or the other, they don't take into consideration the statutory residence test and what's happening in the UK. Whereas we look at the bigger picture and everything as a whole. And for me, in France, it's vital.
I think one of the things that we've seen since Brexit is now Brits need to apply for a visa. They focus on the visa, they move to France, and then far too often they then look at the finances afterwards. So then it's too late. So there's a point you made, Tom, if you've not taken your pension commencement lump sum, all of a sudden you find that you've got to pay French tax on it. You've got loads of UK investments that might be liable to tax in France, whereas they were tax-free in the UK. So getting the understanding of this, where the statutory residence test and when you are and when you're not UK resident is really, really important.
The other thing to say, Rob, is that we encounter situations where quite often we meet people who satisfy the French test of residency. So they're spending more than 183 days in France, but they also satisfy the UK statutory residence test. So you've kind of got this situation where you've got two countries claiming that they're tax resident, and only one of those can prevail, and that's where the treaty kind of kicks in. That's where the treaty kind of rules on these matters. Ideally, you don't want to rely on the treaty, because if you've got a situation where both tax authorities are kind of arguing the toss, then it could take a while, and it could put a pause on all of your planning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think you will have picked up from this morning's discussion that it's not an easy subject. You may think you've left the UK, but then you find out that you haven't. And it's an area that you really need to take some proper advice on and be guided. So if this morning's helped you, we're glad about that. Thank you for listening. Tune into our future broadcasts, subscribe, make sure you get them every Monday. So from me, thank you very much.
Very much. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye.